my publisher was not 100% enthusiastic about this book when I proposed it. And the reason was that this story has been written about before. But my argument was nobody's really told the complete story. The other books came out before the story had really reached its conclusion. And they were, I think, not really, I don't know how to put it, authoritative. Um, and so I, you know, the several of the people who were on the law enforcement side of this story when my book came out said, yes, you've written the definitive book on this subject. So that's gratifying. I mean, what happened is number one, I do a massive amount of research. Number two, a lot of the people who were participants in this story, FBI agents, DEA agents, New York City detectives, they'd never talked to anybody about this. But now a little bit of time has passed, and for the most part, they're retired. And so they were willing to talk about it. And, I think they trusted me. I think they knew that I was just trying to tell the truth. And so this just enormous amount of information and these just unbelievable stories came out. And so many stories that in fact I had to leave a lot of them on the cutting room floor because it would have been, I think, overload. So that's what happened is that I was the lucky recipient of a lot of accounts that people had not been willing to talk about before. Well, the main character is Louis Eppolito. He was born into a mafia family in Brooklyn. His father was what they call a capo or a captain in the Gambino crime family. His father was known as Fat the Gangster, and his uncle was also a capo. He was known as Jimmy the Clam. And so Louis Eppolito was born into this crime family, into this mafia family. His father was kind of an abusive character, and when his father, weeks after his father died of a heart attack, Louis Eppolito rebelled against the family and joined the police academy, which was, I mean, his family and friends just couldn't believe that he would do such a thing. So he was separating himself from his family and reacting against it. But I mean, a lot of us have a hard time leaving our families behind, right? Families have a way of reeling us back in. So by the time he was a detective, he was kind of doing favors for his old friends and family members. And his partner was a detective named Stephen Caracappa, partner and best friend. Caracappa had been, as a teenager, had been charged a felony charge for stealing construction materials. The charge was dismissed. He went to Vietnam and came back and joined the police department at the same time as Eppolito. And they were involved in sort of like medium level corruption at a time when corruption was pretty rampant in the police department. But then something happened, and that is that they got onto the mafia payroll. And so they were paid a monthly retainer of $4,000 by Gaspipe Queso, who was the underboss of the Lucchese crime family. So they were feeding Gaspipe sensitive police information. Who was under investigation? Whose phones were tapped? Who was about to be arrested? But most importantly, who in the mafia ranks was secretly an informant? Who was a rat? And then, what's more, Gaspipe and the Lucchese family would pay these detectives to facilitate the murders of the rats. And in at least one case, they pulled the trigger themselves. So these were high-ranking detectives who were involved in the murder business for the mob, and they were involved in more than a dozen murders. And just astonishingly, they appeared to get away with it. And they eventually retired. They collected their generous police pensions and they moved to Las Vegas. And then just by chance, a detective back in New York got a phone call from the mother of one of their victims, and he started to develop a case against them. Gaspipe Queso was the underboss of the Lucchese family, as we said. He was a scary dude. I mean, even his friends in the mafia were scared of him. He was the worst of like the scariest of the scariest. And some people in the mafia had the idea that they should kill him. And so they hired these kind of hapless underlings to assassinate him in the parking lot of a strip mall in Brooklyn. Now, if you're gonna try to kill Gaspipe, you damn well better kill him. They didn't kill him. They injured him, and he ran into a restaurant and hid out in like a walk-in refrigerator down in the basement. So now Gaspipe devotes himself to revenge, and he figures out who these people are. And he hires the two detectives, Eppolito and Caracappa, to abduct Jimmy Hidell, the underling who was really kind of the leader of this assassination. So Eppolito and Caracappa in a police car start driving around back and forth in front of Jimmy Hidell's family home in Staten Island. And Jimmy Hidell's mother, Betty, sees them and she goes out and confronts them. And they say, we're doing police business, none of your business. And so they drive off. They find Betty's son, Jimmy Hidell, in Brooklyn later that day. They put him in the trunk of a car. They drive him to the parking lot of a Toys R Us in Brooklyn, and they hand him over to Gaspipe. Gaspipe takes Jimmy Hidell to a friend's basement and basically tortures him to death. And Gaspipe wants to do that because he wants to extract as much information about this botched assassination attempt as he can before Jimmy dies. Who was behind this? Who was behind this attempt to kill Gaspipe? So then years later, as you said, Eppolito writes a book. I mean, if you had been involved in this stuff, wouldn't you keep your mouth shut? But Eppolito writes a book. Now, he doesn't describe these things in the book, but he does describe a lot of stuff. And so Betty, Jimmy Hidell's mother, sees Eppolito promoting the book on the Sally Jesse Raphael talk show. And she thinks, holy shit, that's the guy who came looking for my son the day he disappeared. And Betty knew a detective named Tommy Dades because Tommy had investigated the murder by the mob of her other son, Frankie. So Betty doesn't trust a lot of people, but she trusts Tommy. And she calls Tommy. And Tommy takes this bit of information to the Brooklyn DA's office. And the Brooklyn DA's office sets him up, gives him the green light to investigate this. And that's the beginning of the end for them. But I will say, just to make this more complicated, more intrigue, this entire time, federal prosecutors and the FBI knew what Eppolito and Caracappa had done. But for political reasons, they chose to just ignore the case. Their trial was a huge trial. I mean, I happen to really like the trials when I'm working on this kind of a book. I really like them because, right, it's almost like a literary device or like a dramatic device where everybody in the story has to get in the same room together and the truth comes out. And it's kind of excruciating because the victims' families, the perpetrators' families, they're all sitting there in extreme awkward proximity in the courtroom. Everybody is there. And so, I mean, I really loved reading the court transcripts, particularly in a trial like this, where they're trotting out one mobster and shady character after another. I mean, it's like a parade of New York characters. And the trial stuff is complicated. I think it's my job, and I guess your job, to make them clear and understandable for the reader. In this trial, the two cops hired two of the big mob lawyers, who are just they're these preposterously colorful characters. And then you have their um the at lunchtime, everybody would go to the one coffee shop that was near the trial. So then you have the Eppolito and Caracappa and their families in the coffee shop, and the next booth over is the victims' families. I mean, the whole thing is like, it's like a TV show or a movie.